In 1974, I had been living in New York City for about 2 years, and was doing all kinds of part-time jobs for everybody. If you need your floor done, Steve Posen, I would come and strip your floor. If you needed your walls painted, Chuck Close, I'd come and paint your walls clean. If you needed something moved, Lawrence Weiner, I'd come and move whatever you needed moved. Bill Copley, if you needed me to store something and move all your storage, I would do anything that anybody was asking me to do to make a living. I was living and working in Soho. I lived on Green Street at 102 Green Street, right across from the Green Street Bar to Come. At that time, it wasn't the Green Street Bar. And I had received a phone call. I was working on my master's at New York University, and Don Tompkins was the head of the sculpture department at that time, and I got a call from him. His wife just had gotten a new job. Betty Tompkins was working for a new gallery from Germany, from Berlin, Cologne, and the gallery dealer's name was René Bloch. They were putting together their inaugural exhibition, the first show that they were going to have at this space. The space was on the second floor at the corner of Spring and West Broadway, so it was right in the middle of Soho. I got a phone call. I went over to take a look to see if they said they needed some help, if I'd come over and take a look. And they were trying to divide the gallery space, divide the wall so that they could separate the audience from the exhibition that was being installed. And for René Bloch's first exhibition in New York City in October of '94, he was bringing the performance artist Joseph Beuys to New York to live in a cage with a coyote for a week. The metaphor, and if we're familiar with Joseph Beuys, everything has a metaphoric meaning, was that it would be the wildness of the coyote, being America, and the taming or the civilization of the Germans or the Europeans in Joseph Beuys, and the two would spend a week together and they would mesh and become either one or the other. When I got to the gallery, they had built out of wood about a third of a wall out of lattice that couldn't have held anything. If anybody would have pushed on it real hard, the whole thing would have fallen. So I was there with a couple other people, and I knew a fabricator down the street. So we took the measurements, went down the following morning and gave the measurements to a fabricator. They fabricated in steel a gate and a fencing with a gate. And about 4 days later, we came back, picked it up, took it back to the gallery, and we installed it. Less than 3 days after we had installed the gating, fencing, separation, I was asked if I could help the gallery with security, and if I could assist the artist that was coming. His name was Joseph Beuys. I said, sure. And so from that point on, for about 2 years, every now and then, or whenever they needed me, René Bloch or Betty Tompkins would call me, and I would come over and help install shows. This specific show was a little strange in that Joseph Beuys was pulled up in an ambulance. He was not visible. He was wrapped in a felt that looked like a carpet. They picked him up and carried him into the elevator. They took him up to the second floor, took him inside the space. They had camera people and an audience of probably about 75 people. And they unrolled him inside of the cage with the coyote. Along with the coyote was an area of hay, some food, bedding for Joseph. And it was pretty sparse, but yet at the same time, there were some things inside the space. Immediately, Joseph got up, adjusted his hat and his vest, picked up his cane, and went over and rolled himself back up in the felt and started to do a performance. Again, the performance is the wildness of the United States and the civilization of Europe. And so the whole event was about this type of activity. These two pieces right here are remnances that I have. This was a signed poster by Joseph. The posters had been on a table and had been put in a corner. And during 1, 2, 3, 4, it was like the 4th or 5th day, I can't remember, that the coyote had pissed in the corner and had pissed on on part of the on the posters and on the desk and on that general area. They were having trouble with him urinating everywhere, and I asked him if I could have them. He signed the two. The one that was on top was the worst. This was the second one. I gave the other piece to Sue Scott when she had curated a show for me at Cornell Fine Art Museum. And so I've had this since that time, since '74. And then I was part of a New York City street art exhibition, Keith Haring and the New York City street art exhibition in Kiel, Germany. And so when I went to Kiel in 2001 to install the exhibition, they had that year an exhibition on Joseph Beuys and the piece called I Like America, America Likes Me. And I had a really good time in Kiel. I enjoyed it. We had a great show. And the curator gave me this piece as a memoir of both my exhibition in Kiel and my consciousness of working with Joseph Beuys and René Bloch in 1974. A lot of people, especially the Germans, when they find out that I worked for René Bloch, who ran Documenta, the big German show in Kassel, are a little amazed. I mean, one of the things is when you're with people, it's not that you heard the story. You were actually part of it. And one of the things that I became consciously aware of is that metaphor and symbolism don't always have to tell the truth, that all things aren't real in the world of art, that pretense can be just as important, and symbolism and metaphor can be just as important as something that is real. Did Joseph Beuys live in the Coyote for 7 days with a coyote? No, he didn't. At 6:15, he'd go upstairs, have his drink. The next morning at 10 minutes till 11, he'd come down and get back in the cage. Was the coyote really wild and dangerous? No. It was from the Bronx Zoo and it was tame. There was never any ability of him being harmed, even though the whole time it was about pretense. Did it appear that he could be? Yes, because the coyote played with him the whole time and roughhoused with him the whole time. Is it important to know the truth or for it to allow to be a deception? I think that in many cases, if we go back to Marcel Duchamp and his different identities, or we go to Yves Klein, who jumped into space, did Yves Klein really jump into space two stories up and nosedive into the ground 3, 4, 5 times? If you go to the Louvre and look at the photograph, there's a split line at the horizon. I'm not sure. I don't think so. But does it change the fact that that's a story about art? No, it doesn't. And does the fact that Joseph Beuys was never really in any danger change the story? If you believe that it's true, then you've got to adjust to the fact that not everything in art, not everything in life is true. That metaphor and symbolism sometimes are more important than realism. So that's my little story about Joseph Beuys and René Bloch.